It was a hot July Saturday, and we were up at our lake home watching our kids jumping in the water, and we looked at each other and said, boy, aren't we lucky? Just look at these three beautiful, healthy children. And we were going to go on a trip up into the wilderness, and you only get there by airplane. So that night we were packing in the car to get ready, and Chris started yelling, "Mom, Mom." And so I went in his room, and he said, "My legs itch so bad, I can hardly stand it." And I said, "Your legs itch?" And he said, "Yes." And we happened to have a doctor next door and went across the street. And I went and said, "We're going to this wilderness area. Should we be taking Chris if he feels like this?" And they said, "Oh, he's probably just got a little bug. If he's okay in the morning, I'd take him." So he went to sleep that night. Next morning, he felt great. So we packed up, went and flew out of Wenatchee up into the wilderness for a weekend fishing, hiking trip. And every evening around 7 o'clock, Chris would start itching his legs. And it didn't matter what I put on it, I couldn't stop the itch. And at that time, he didn't have a fever. But 4 days later, this itching had not stopped. And I could tell he was getting a fever. And Pat would take Kelly and Kevin hiking around, and Chris no longer wanted to do that. So we packed up, we got a hold of our pilot, and he came and picked us up, and we came back to Spokane, and I immediately took him to the hospital and called our pediatrician. And a half hour later, he came out and said, "Chris is very, very sick. He has Hodgkin's disease, of which I had never heard of. And he is in a 4th stage, which means very severe. And he had it from the top of his head to his toes." And there began our journey. And it was a 13-month journey for Chris. But his journey for those 13 months have left so many families and children touched by his life. Not only do we have the Ronald McDonald House and the families that had no place to sleep. In the hospital, they'd be sitting in chairs, lying on the floor. I'd go around and collect blankets and pillows out of rooms with nobody and bring them in. They took care of the patient, but the parents and the brothers and sisters and so forth had no place to go or to sleep or to shower. There was one mother, a single mother with a small child, that had leukemia. And then she had another child that was a little bit older. And she came to me one day, Chris was still in the hospital, and she said, if I could only just sleep in a bed, take a shower, it would mean so much. So I said, I'll take you home. And I don't live very far from here, and so we took her other daughter and went up to our house, and they played in our backyard and played with the dogs, and I had them take a shower and wash their clothes and fed them and had them take a nap and brought them back down to the house. And there was one family after another like these that had no place to go, no home. I was so lucky because we lived about 2 miles from the hospital, and I could run home, take care of my other children and my husband, and then go back to the hospital. So as time went along, to give you a little insight into Chris's personality and why things turned out the way they did, he was always funny. And we would go to his radiation or his chemo appointments, and we'd walk in the room, and he'd always look for the person that he thought was the loneliest, and we'd go over and sit by them. And by the time the person went in for their treatment, they had been laughing because he was so funny, and just everything always came alive when he walked in the room. And so everyone fell in love with Chris. And he was just a happy, very intelligent child. And he brought love just by his presence. So when we lost Chris, I kept thinking, these parents and these families just cannot sleep on the floor. They bring a sleeping bag or something. I'm surprised the hospital even allowed it. But anyway, after a couple of years, I went to see the McDonald's owner-operator, the one and only, and I had been told by the Seattle Ronald McDonald House, do not get hooked up with McDonald's because they'll run the whole show and you'll have nothing to say. And sure enough, this individual was not enthused. So I waited a couple more years and went to see Mark. Well, it was just the opposite. He said, I would love to do that with you. As long as you do the work, you raise the money and you keep it going and so forth. So at that time, I was president of a group called the Candlelighters, and it's a national group for families who have a child with cancer. And we had formed a board with officers. And I thought, okay, if we're going to do this, Pat had promised me that if I needed something down the road, all I had to do was ask for it. Well, I knew what it was going to be. It was going to be, can you raise a few $1 million so we can build this house? So we switched positions, and he knew the right people to put on the board, the right people to ask for this or that. And in fact, one thing that I had a problem with was to find people to be on the board that I had a saying, you give people an opportunity to donate and become a part of this project rather than just say, I want your money. They would buy into it, and thusly we raised the money. And how many years did it take you?
Oh, it was, I really quite frankly forget, but it was like at least 3 years as I recall.
And so we did that, opened the house with no debt. And
which had hardly ever been done before. Most of the Ronald McDonald houses at that time would open up, but with a heavy burden owing to the banks or to whoever they borrowed the money from, or many of them just went ahead and took out long-term leases where they would not own the homes themselves. And yet we actually opened without owning a dollar, which was just unheard of with the McDonald's people. So, and Mark Ray and his group of operators just were terrific to work with. Became very involved and got people like the Lynn ladies that would go ahead and bring cookies up from Lynn and on a regular basis. And to my knowledge, they're still operating right now today, doing the same thing. And getting the people to come to my offices to go ahead and do these telethons, and they were expected, if they accepted the responsibility to help out, that they would have at least 20 names that either they couldn't feel comfortable calling, but they knew they had the potential of going ahead and making a gift. And to my knowledge, there was really only one well-known name here in Spokane that went ahead and turned us down. Everybody else went ahead and realized this was solely needed, and needed faster than slower as far as getting things done. And Carol had gone ahead and looked around this area for quite some time as to where a location that would be good for the families, good for the kids, and yet not so far out, which is basically what we were looking at because we didn't have that much money to spend. So it was really, it was incredible how responsive some people were. Some people I expected maybe we might go ahead and get a $5 or a $10 bill, and all of a sudden there was 1,000. It was just absolutely amazing. And a few, some of the financial institutions here really got involved. The Old National Bank was involved, Seafirst was involved, and if you got the institution involved as part of their charitable program, they usually would go ahead and have some of their employees also become active and want to be part of our board. And that's how the whole thing went ahead and got together.
And we can't forget our star shine.
What Carol's referring about is we try to use ideas to raise the money that hadn't been used before or we knew could be successful if you got the right people to do it. Well, being president of the board at Gonzaga University, Father Coughlin was one of Carol's and my closest friends, and came up with the idea, and I'd seen this on one of the other Ronald McDonald House Fund campaigns, where we would shine shoes. And we tried to go ahead and get like the mayor of the town or the president of the bank to go ahead and be the person shining their shoes for the tips. There was not a sign that said, you know, shoe shine $5 or $1. And it was so successful, people were standing in line to get their shoes shined.
And it was on St. Patrick's Day. So we knew that would be successful.
Drank a lot of green beer. But with, you know, friendships really, I thought for the next 50 years, I'd be trying to raise money to go ahead and help others out as far as their favorite charities and so forth. And amazingly enough, people just went ahead and they wanted to go ahead and continue to be involved with the Ronald McDonald House.
And from that little adorable 11-year-old that had Hodgkin's disease, his life touched more people than we'll ever know. And we have a scholarship at Gonzaga University in his name, one at Gonzaga Prep in his name, and a special award at one of the elementary schools, which was Wilson, that the Chris West Memorial Award for the most outstanding boy and girl that are humanitarians, that look out for other people. And it's a really big, coveted thing to be able to receive that reward. Some of the kids have stayed at the house, have gone to high school, and gone to college on Chris's scholarship. And there's one particular young man that had the same thing Chris had at the same time. And they became very close friends. And he beat the Hodgkin's disease. And at that time, they had nothing that they knew of for children that age to heal them. Well, he was in the hospital, and then he went and used the scholarship at Prep. And then he wanted to be a doctor. He went to Gonzaga on Chris's scholarship. He adopted 5 children because they aren't able to have children after they have this full body radiation. And his mother called me when he turned 40, and he had just passed away. And she said, he's got the most wonderful children. And if we had only had a Ronald McDonald House for those other families, it would have made their lives so much better, as it did ours. So we are thrilled with the new Ronald McDonald House, even though we just love the original one, because that's where our heart and soul is. But for anyone that has a child, and you're so fortunate if you don't have something happen as far as being ill or something, I would hope that you could find it in your heart and in your pocketbook and help us finish the second Ronald McDonald House in Spokane. And I have just one thing I wanted to close this with. This was a teacher of Chris's. He aimed for the stars and brushed our world as he went by. He left a trail of stardust for us to follow. Thank you, Chris. Thank you.